Hello, my name is Morgan Reynolds, and welcome to my presentation on the British Library for LSC 524 History of Libraries. The topics that I'll be talking about during this presentation are the history of the library, vision statements, controversies, unique items, and the references. In the beginning of its history, the British Library is a rich in history as a library that was created in 1793, first originally being named the British Museum Library. It was created as a one general repository to hold the collections of Sir Hans Sloane, Sir Robert Cotton, and Robert and Edward Harley. For the museum was a twofold inspiration, historical and scientific. It brought together for preservation in the first place, and it was proved later for vast development. The cumulative results so far as they had gone, on the one hand, of the studies in national records of the Elizabethan and Jacobean antiquaries, and on the other hand of researchers into nature and natural law of the inquiring minds of the preceded 100 years, originating before the foundation of the Royal Society at the Restoration, and marked by increasing foundation abroad with academics with the wide scientific. When it had inherited the library of King George III in 1823, the same King George who did not want the United States to become independent, its printed books actually doubled in number, prompting further development of the site in the current British Museum. Beyond donations, the library grew in its collection throughout purchase, exchanges, and legal deposits. The gift of George III's collection came from his son George IV to be able to create an extensive repository for the British public. King George III was also known as the king who fought against the United States, becoming its own independent nation. Italian literature was one of the largest donations in the British Library during this time. They own one of the most important collections of Italian Cinquantine outside Italy, and probably the largest one of the Italian popular material with around 10,000 16th century editions, which is more than 9% of mainly popular books. Those cheaply printed and widely sold, read, and listened to are shared by people from all social classes in the early modern period, surviving a single copy in the world. This unique collection comprises an impressive number and incredible variety of Italian publications, which has been nourished by donations and purchases since the very foundation of the British Museum in 1753. There were many locations in which the library that are magnificent, but the most sought after is the centerpiece of the British Museum Library, which is a huge round dome ceiling reading room, which was designed by Sidney Smirke in association with the librarian Anthony Panizzi and completed by 1857. Sidney Smirke was a very well known painter and architect during this period. Having him do this design was a very big deal for the British Museum Library. Now, this dome has been an inspiration for many authors in the setting for a book. Now, this dome has been the inspiration for many different authors in the settings for their books. Now, George Gissing used it as a setting in his 1891 novel New Grub Street, describing it as the Valley of Shadow Books, while laminating the difficulties of obtaining a reader ticket. In Virginia Woolf's A Room of Its Own, the reading room is the focal point in her examination of the exclusion of women from the literary canon. Its roof was its own actually used in the climax of Alfred Hitchcock's film Black Mail. Now, in 1972, there was a major change for the library altogether. This is when the United Kingdom, headed by Queen Elizabeth II, created the British Library Act of 1972. This act was established a national library for the United Kingdom under the control and management of a new board and incorporating the library of the British Museum and for connected purposes. The biggest challenge that the new museum struggled with was to find a location that would be big enough to keep the collection, but there was much pushback from the public regarding the location of where the new library would live. Land was purchased beside St. Pancras Station in 1976, and new plans by Wilson were officially approved 2 years later. Money was for construction was held up until 1982. However, the project was plagued by further shortages in funding and political support. During construction, its architecture was decreed by some, most notably by Charles, Prince of Wales, but other critics applauded the modern style and convenience. There was very important accomplishment for the United Kingdom, especially Great Britain. Opening its doors to the public in November of 1997 and receiving an official inauguration by H.M. Queen Elizabeth II in the following June, and the library became the largest public building constructed in Britain in the last 100 years. Some current innovations that the library has done regarding the newspaper collection, which began in 2014, the British Library has one of the largest and most comprehensive newspaper collections anywhere in the world, with more than 750 million pages of newspapers spanning more than 3 centuries. The British Library newspaper collection comprises 52,000 separate newspaper journals and periodical titles and consists of over 664,000 bound volumes and parcels and over 370,000 reels of microfilm. The newspaper program is a GBP 33M capital program that was developed in response to a specific and generic or strategic challenges to guarantee long-term storage, preservation, and access to the British Library newspaper collection. When completed, the program will deliver key benefits in terms of preservation, access, and research, and audience development and efficiency. It's particular in relation to digitization, funding models, storage solutions, and on-site provisions, and accessibilities. New technology has been used to help the collection of over 750 million pages of newspapers, which is now growing by over 6 million pages of newspapers each year. Actual staff do not come into the library to pick up and receive these newspapers from the archives. Instead, the retrieval is done by autonomous cranes. These cranes know for the location of every newspaper volume and every stack of newspapers that fetch through the combinations of conveyors and turntables, takes it through, and the airlock then runs into the workstation. Then there is where the operator extracts the item and they batch them together overnight and send them to the reading room, which they've been requested. Another initiative the British Library has done recently was forging alliances with funding and research councils, enabling work with higher education sector to develop collection-led research and a pool staff expertise to maximize effect. The library higher education team fosters such relationships and has initiated national subject training days, which introduce postgraduate students to the range of resources from oral history to maps, prints, and drawings and that are available to them in their research careers, while the learning team and the regional library program help to stimulate public interest in history among schools and lifelong learners' constituents. Today, the library contains 170 to 100 million books from around the world. There is a nice courtyard from the public to enjoy in the front of the library. The library is a legal deposit library, which means the library contains every published book throughout the UK and Ireland. Around 3 million books are added each year. Over 1.6 million people visit the library each year. Now, the library I currently work at has only 120,000 visitors in 1 year in our small university. Now, when I work at the front desk, our 2 floor building always seems to be packed with patrons everywhere we go. So I can only imagine what it would be like seeing over 1.6 million people in a year. The vision statements of the library. They had 5 core visions. One was being access, engagement, and inclusion, which ensures the service they offer and the collection they hold to be for everyone. Modernization of the library services, investing in skills, processes, systems, and capabilities to deliver the quality of library services their patrons deserve. Deepening their partnerships, collaborations with libraries and memory institutions of all kinds across the UK and around the world to achieve more than the library could ever do just by themselves. Sustainability and resilience, working to reduce their carbon impact and collaborating with partners to create a more sustainable future. And finally, new spaces in North and South, in Yorkshire and in London, delivering new world class physical spaces designed to welcome future generations of visitors and users. Then they even have a staff vision statement. The British Library additionally has a set of values they hope their staff will follow each day as they work to help fulfill the necessary services for their patrons in the future. From their professional community, the staff members they would like to see is that they would put users at the heart of everything they do, to listen and innovate and adapt to ever-changing world. treat everyone with respect and compassion, embrace equality, fairness, diversity, act with openness and honesty, and finally collaborate to do more than they could do by themselves. There were a couple controversies I actually found when it came to the British Library. The first one began with an erotic collection that was donated in the 1850s. While it was still named the British Museum Library, the private case of the British Library is a collection of erotic printed books transferred from the British Museum in 1973. Established in the 1850s, it contained material that was segregated from the main British Library collections on grounds of obscenity. Its names derive from it being kept originally in lockable bookcases and cupboards in the keeper's room and collection grounds of obscenity. Its name derives Established in 1850, it contains material that was segregated from the main British Museum library. Collections on the grounds of obscenity. Its name derives from it being kept originally in lockable bookcases and cupboards in the keeper's room. Items from the collection were issued to readers only with written permission. This prevented the British Museum from violating obscenity laws and deterred theft and rare collectible items. Today, the private case contains approximately 250,000. The case contains approximately 2,500 volumes, but it has held up to 4,000 volumes in the past. This is because books were moved in and out of the collection according to social mores of the time, and the definition of obscenity has seen many changes since the mid 19th century. Another controversy came in the form of political affiliations to the United Kingdom. The library had sent out a statement. The British Library has this week been the subject of an inaccurate and misleading media coverage in the national newspaper. The coverage, based on the selective quotation of leaked documents, gives the false impression of the British Library and its employees are engaging in political partisan campaigning. In particular, in misrepresentation, a list of resources relating to racism and anti racism compiled by one of our staff networks as evidence of the support for a particular political party or ideology. Further coverage makes inaccurate statements regarding changes to the presentation of our collections and the role we play by our staff networks. The reporting fails to incorporate the library's response to these claims, which was provided prior to this publication. This had come after an article written by the Daily Mail, a very popular news source out of the United Kingdom. The Daily Mail had written the headline, British Library's chief librarian says racism is the creation of white peoples as bosses call for change to displays to wake the BLM movement after colleagues were urged to support the Labour MP Diane Abbott. Liz Jolly is urging white members of the staff of the British Library to support the Anti Racism Action Plan, which was put in place last month, according to The Telegraph. Her comments were made after she backed plans for a cultural overhaul of the library and urged white colleagues to show the same support. In the video clip, she says, colleagues, that I think, as I have said before, that we need to make sure some white colleagues are involved because racism is a creation of white people. Documents reveal that the changes to the library's displays could place to decolonize the British Library's collection after a letter signed by hundreds of members of staff declared a racial state of emergency, it was reported. The British Library established a corporate anti racism project in 2020 and was designed to encourage participants via 6 subgroups with staff recommendations incorporated into enacting change. The library's Race Equality Action Plan of 2022. The research and recommendation of the cataloging and metadata subgroup fed into a pilot project proposed to the proof of concept to develop end-to-end workflows focused on the South Asian collection and the Caribbean collection. Work had already been done to align ethical approaches to cataloging with the library's values. During the pilot project, new training models for the ethical approach to metadata are being developed, and the outcome will be remove barriers to access and embed sustainable best practices. Finally, some of the unique items that can be found at the British Library. The British Library has many of its own special items that can be only seen when you visit. The massive building fills 180 miles of shelving with over 12 million books. For sightseers, only one room matters, the treasures room. It showcases early Gospels of papyrus and the first completely New Testament, written in Greek from the 4th century, illuminating manuscripts with pages lovingly illustrated by monks, some of the finest art from Europe's Middle Ages, and the Gutenberg Bible from 1455. Gutenberg's revolutionary movable metal type made printing affordable. By printing information to masses, the innovation helped power Europe in the modern age. There is the Magna Carta from 1215, documents the first steps towards government by people rather than kings, and the kings were forced to hang for a seal on it. Not only these items were available at the British Library, but additionally, works of the genius such as notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci, detailing his marvelous inventions, and laboratory notes by Marilyn Monk and Kathy Holding, pioneers of genetic diagnosis. You'll travel through Africa, Asia, and Europe via the history of the book and discover religious texts from across the world, including the Mile Quran and the library's also oldest Quran manuscripts. Picture yourself at the desks of the great writers as you look at handwritten manuscripts of the Bronte sisters, Virginia Woolf and Sylvia Plath, Andrea Levy's working drafts from The Small Land and The Long Song, and you'll have the chance to look at works from Mozart to McCartney. Additionally, you can see the desk where Jane Austen penned her novels, original writings from Charles Dickens and Shakespeare's First Folio. Their art of the book displayed dedicated women artists such as Karen Blitz, Jormana Meldij, and Christine Tack and Angela Lorenz. A letter written and composer of anti-slavery campaigner Charles Ignatius Sancho. Science and innovation through the years, through Michelangelo's anatomical illustrations to Florence Nightingale's original diaphragm of the causes of morality. In the Army in the East, initially recently added to the treasure gallery, include the St. Cuthbert's Gospel, Emily Bronte's Notebook, and Ryan Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending musical score. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening.